The following is an HDNet original presentation.
Tonight, follow-up investigations, new information in a series we call What Happened Next? First up, in September 2010, we brought you the previously untold story of how a Chinese businessman tried to sneak millions of phony pills into American drugstores.
Mr. Xu was unlike any other person that we had encountered. Just by the array of products, it was clear that he had access to manufacturing and distribution capabilities.
Now we've learned that the man we originally profiled was also behind the largest medicine recall ever in Europe.
He had with him a laptop computer. We found evidence on there linking Xu to the European companies that have been involved in bringing these goods in. So the laptop was gold dust.
Digging deeper into our original investigations, our reporting never stops. We'll bring you the news tonight on Dan Rather Reports. Good evening from New York. Tonight, an update on one of our most talked about programs, fake prescription medicine. Around the world, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and our investigation uncovered criminals plotting to infiltrate the lucrative U.S. market. Since our original report ran, we've learned new details of an international crime ring that got their fake pills into the medicine cabinets of some very ill patients in Europe. But before we get to that, we begin with our original broadcast, the story of a big-time pill peddler, a mysterious Chinese businessman named Kevin Xu. Our story begins in Thailand, at the airport in Bangkok. In March 2007, a meeting was set up between a Chinese businessman, Kevin Xu, and a customer who wanted to buy loads of prescription drugs.
I'm very happy that we can meet together and we can talk about something.
Very good opportunity for both of us.
Yeah. So we can know each other more and then we can do business.
Right.
Xu was hoping to move large quantities of expensive medicines. The problem was Xu's pills were fake.
What's your biggest product right now?
Casodex.
Okay.
Casodex and Plavix.
Plavix.
Casodex is used to treat prostate cancer, and Plavix is for prevention of blood clots. What Xu doesn't know is that his customer is actually a U.S. Customs agent wearing a wire, and that the entire meeting is being videotaped at a distance by another officer. We've disguised the identity and the voice of this agent. He was posing as a shady importer who could sell Xu's fake drugs to unsuspecting hospitals and pharmacies in the United States.
Good afternoon, Bloom Pharmacy.
Xu was boldly trying to penetrate the lucrative and well-protected American prescription drug market.
Your market
Right,
in
yeah,
the United States.
And I have some customers that I think I can do volume sales on.
We're going into the operations center.
Andre Watson is the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Special Agent in charge of the Xu operation.
Just by the array of products, it was clear that he had access to manufacturing and distribution capabilities. Mr. Xu was unlike any other person that we had encountered. Most individuals that come on our radar typically counterfeit lifestyle enhancement drugs, drugs such as Cialis and Viagra. In the case of Mr. Xu, he offered a wide variety of drugs.
At the airport in Bangkok, Watson's team of agents set up an elaborate sting operation and hoped to get a rare look inside the Chinese businessman's global operation. And Kevin Xu did not disappoint. He gave an agent a list of 29 medicines that he could provide. On the list were life-saving drugs, not only Casodex and Plavix, but Aricept, which is used to treat Alzheimer's, and Tamiflu for flu victims. The feds had no idea who was helping Hsu, but they suspected it was a group of conspirators who could produce large quantities of phony pills. Well, tell me something about this man, Kevin Hsu. Was he a slick operator?
He was a perfect example of a businessman, well-versed and knowledgeable about the products that he offered, as well as the benefits and the routes to best introduce them into the commerce of that applicable country where they would be used.
But it wasn't the feds that found Kevin Hsu. It was investigators from the giant drug company Pfizer. Men like Hsu are a threat to patient safety and the corporate bottom line. At this state-of-the-art facility in Groton, Connecticut, scientists used the latest technology to figure out exactly what the fake pills are made of and compare them to samples of real Pfizer medicine.
You can see there's a lot of areas where the patterns don't match, so this sample is a counterfeit Lipitor sample.
These scientists are part of a team headed by John Clark, the global head of security for Pfizer. Many times what Pfizer analysts find inside fake medicine could be poisonous and deadly.
We've seen talcum powder, boric acid, brick dust, highway paint to give it a color, floor wax used to give it a nice sheen so it would look more authentic. Somebody's ingesting something with boric acid, brick dust, highway paint, and floor wax, thinking they're getting medicine.
At these labs, scientists test 50 to 70 suspect samples every month. When Clark's analysts deconstructed Kevin Hsu's fakes, they found very little, if any, of the active ingredient. If a patient took one of Hsu's pills, the harm could be devastating and irreversible.
Aricept, which we actually got counterfeit from Kevin Hsu. It's a very, very popular, very, very effective Alzheimer's medicine. People think, I'm treating this. My doctor has said I need X number, milligrams of Aricept, and I'm taking it regularly, but the disease just keeps weakening me. People could be dying gradually because they're not getting the medicines they should be. So you get long-term consequences, probably premature death, and nobody's even recognizing why that happened.
If you're taking a medicine and you think you're getting the real thing, you get a counterfeit, you're losing that time.
Absolutely. The counterfeiters, it's a dollar, equation. They just want the money. The impact on the public is of no consequence to them.
Counterfeiting medicine is big money. Investigators estimate Kevin Hsu and whoever was helping him were making millions. Roger Bate knows a lot about the value of fake pills. He's an economist who has been studying the global surge in counterfeit medicines. He says an enormous profit margin is what drives counterfeiters.
If you take an example for something like Viagra, which is one of the most counterfeited drugs, sildenafil citrate, which is the active ingredient, on prescription in the United States, 1 kilogram would sell for roughly about $200,000 once it's pressed into the pills. I can buy that. Even a white face in India or China, I can buy the active ingredient for about $60 a kilogram. Now, you've got to press that into pills, and you've got to fake the packaging, which is the very hard part, and you've got to infiltrate the supply chain. But that's an enormous markup, $60 to $200,000.
As far as federal agents knew, no one in the United States had yet fallen victim to Kevin Hsu's fake medicine, but counterfeit pills have proven deadly in the past. In one shocking case in 2006, a 58-year-old woman, Marcia Bergeron, died in her Canadian home after taking counterfeit medicine she had bought online.
The coroner's report showed that her heart arrhythmia, which had caused her death, had come about because of heavy metals in the drugs that she'd bought.
It was a counterfeit drug.
And it was a counterfeit product.
Bates says about 200,000 people are dying from fakes every year. Most of the unsuspecting victims are in the developing world, but not all.
In the United States, 149 people's deaths can be attributed to counterfeit heparin. Heparin is a blood-thinning drug, and intentionally contaminated, cheaper version of heparin was introduced in 2007-2008, which led to adverse reactions as a result.
How did that happen?
Well, the supply chain for heparin was not as secure as we would have liked. As the company involved, the US company which was importing that, they ran checks on it. They did everything that they were statutorily obliged to do. But the counterfeiters were clever. They knew that the test that they would run, they knew what to substitute to mimic for the test. So they're very, very clever. It's not like they're just, let's put this ingredient instead of that. They'll put that ingredient in which will fake the test.
And do we know where those drugs came from?
We know they came from China.
The federal agents tracking Kevin Xu were highly concerned that his fake drugs could harm or kill thousands of unsuspecting people if they didn't stop him first. After an hour-long meeting in Bangkok, the feds knew their China connection was the real deal and extremely dangerous. When they returned to the U.S., agents kept up an email relationship with Xu. They set up a bogus company called Tri-State Distributors and made several large purchases of fake drugs worth more than $167,000 from Xu. Over time, they established trust and made promises of even bigger purchases. After several months, Xu traveled to Houston to arrange a deal in person with his new customers. When he arrived, the undercover agents took him to an office they had staged to look like a legitimate business, and again the agents secretly taped the meeting. At the meeting, Xu lays out the elaborate methods of his operations, including bribes.
The strong relation with customers, you pay money to customers.
Right.
The officers. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you pay money so that everything gets taken care of. Okay.
But if Customs does seize a shipment in a raid like this one in Miami earlier this year, counterfeiters like Xu can avoid losing an entire delivery by sending multiple small shipments.
Safe quantity one time is 500 strips.
No more than that. Well, that's good, because if one gets stopped, the rest keep coming.
Xu also told agents that he could hide where his shipments were coming from by sending his products through many ports before arriving in America. And Xu said he was capable of delivering massive amounts of fake medicine. When agents asked if he could ship 5,000 boxes in 5 days, Xu's response shocked the agents.
Our production line is one lot. We can maximum, I think it's 200,000 boxes. Yeah.
200,000 boxes could contain well over 1 million individual fake pills in just one shipment. U.S. agents received little cooperation from Beijing in finding the manufacturer of Xu's fakes, but they knew China's shady underworld is exploding with back-alley chemists. So much so that authorities were confident that Xu could deliver on his claims. Xu told agents he was involved in a number of legitimate businesses, including making generic drugs for Chinese hospitals.
Generic medicines, we are Chinese government supplier. Some government hospital, we also supply some generic medicines to the hospitals in China.
It was this legitimate business, agents believe, that gave Xu the resources and experience to run some illegitimate operations. He started small, selling fake Viagra online. This list, found on Xu's computer, shows he had many customers. But they weren't getting what they paid for. The fake Viagra has little of the real ingredients. And take a look at this. When John Clark at Pfizer showed us Kevin Xu's counterfeit version, distinguishing it from the legitimate pill proved to be a challenge.
I'll be frank with you, I cannot tell the difference between these two.
The real Viagra is on the right. Regardless of the appearance of the pills, it is the exterior boxes or bottles that fool the consumer and the authorities. And making identical packaging is what really set Kevin Xu apart.
We use a laser machine to print out, because we know how it is not advantage to do the drugs. So we do the copy. Maybe we use the same machinery.
The packaging resembled authentic packaging used by major pharmaceutical manufacturers. And his goal was to replicate the lot and batch numbers on legitimate shipments. When they're introduced into the legitimate commerce, it's more difficult for law enforcement and or regulatory authorities to identify the counterfeit pill from the legitimate pill.
It was this attention to detail that could allow Hsu and his buyers to avoid detection indefinitely. If one of Hsu's fakes were ever tested, inspectors would look at that lot number and suspect a faulty batch from the manufacturer. So, what happened to Kevin Hsu? That's coming up next. The Sting. You'll want to see it, so stay with us. In a suburban Texas office building, the trap was set. Federal agents had convinced Kevin Hsu that they were ready to make a deal, and Hsu was eager to please.
Ed is a reliable person. We can trust you, so we talk about this business with you. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Andre Watson, the special agent in charge of the Hsu sting operation, says Hsu tried to convince agents his fakes were undetectable and boasted that his products were already circulating in Europe.
We do it 6 years. In the European market, 6 years. 6 years. We have more experience.
How did he get the fake medicine into Europe?
He spoke about an elaborate network whereby bribes would be paid and transshipment routes would be utilized.
Some Asian countries have a very good relation with European countries. Mm-hmm. Maybe Malaysia or Singapore with very good relation with the UK.
Moving to the UK, then
Singapore,
then to here.
Then France. It's a safe then from China to UK.
Watson thinks that Hsu's sophisticated smuggling routes, combined with his ability to produce very convincing packaging, allowed him to fly under the radar in Europe for years.
The level of care and attention in terms of transshipment, separating packages, was unreal.
But finding a way to infiltrate the American supply chain was infinitely more difficult. Hsu had to find someone who could authenticate his fake medicine with fake paperwork. It was this faked paperwork that Hsu was hoping his new American contacts would give him. Once his counterfeit drugs were paired with the fraudulent documents, he had an open door to the largest and most lucrative pharmaceutical market, the American market.
I take what we get from you, I move it in here with this ball, we mix it,
we create pedigrees.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's the key right there.
But before Hsu could seal the deal in the United States, his international and illicit business started to unravel. Across the Atlantic, in the United Kingdom in May 2007, an alert pharmaceutical wholesaler noticed tiny differences on some Zyprexa packaging, and the suspect boxes were found to be counterfeit.
You'll see a slight difference in the color between this color and this color.
Mike Russo, head of global security for Eli Lilly, the makers of Zyprexa, says the differences between the real and counterfeit medicine were easy to miss. The fake blister packs on the right had a slightly darker purple stripe, and the lot numbers were printed upside down.
If you were a patient and you didn't have a comparison model, it'd be pretty difficult to determine that.
After the discovery, the authorities in London issued 4 massive Class 1 recalls, the most serious kind. 3 different medicines were involved: Zyprexa, used to treat schizophrenia, Plavix for stroke victims, and Casodex for cancer patients. All 3 were pulled from the shelves, but not before 70,000 boxes of potentially counterfeit medicine had been introduced into Britain's national health system. Andre Watson's team in the U.S. cooperated with British authorities to find out if Hsu's operation might be the source of the fakes circulating in the U.K. They discovered that the recalled Zyprexa in the United Kingdom and the Zyprexa U.S. agents purchased directly from Hsu had the same lot numbers. Still posing as a corrupt pharmaceutical distributor, A U.S. agent pressed Hsu for details in an email. One of my customers called and said there's a recall of Zyprexa in Europe with the same lot number. Have you heard anything? Hsu responds, yes, we have checked our old channel in EU. There are some confused problems, so don't sell to EU market. Kevin Hsu is now known to have been behind the mass drug recalls in the UK.
It was recognized that we were dealing with a major producer and distributor.
And that's what had U.S. authorities most concerned. Hsu's reach was quickly widening. If agents didn't act fast, Hsu could find a way into American pharmacies.
Potentially, those pharmaceutical products could have been prescribed to unknowing U.S. citizens. If their medical condition were terminal, the results could have been deadly.
Although Kevin Hsu eluded capture in Europe, U.S. agents weren't about to let him slip away. Between the fake drugs Hsu had sold undercover agents and the details he revealed on tape, they had what they needed and moved in to make an arrest.
Police, put your hands out to your side. Come on, put your hands up.
Yes, sir.
Customs.
Sir. Customs and immigration. You stand up.
Federal agents, can you stand up?
Yes, sir.
Stand up.
Stand up.
A stunned Kevin Hsu was taken into custody. He was tried in U.S. federal court and found guilty of selling counterfeit goods. He was ordered to pay almost $1.3 million in restitution to Eli Lilly and Pfizer, and he was sentenced to 6.5 years in jail. He is currently serving his sentence in Big Spring, Texas. But we now know much more about another, much larger operation that had Kevin Hsu's fingerprints all over it. That story is straight ahead. Welcome back. No one likes to think about what might have happened had Kevin Hsu not been caught, especially because authorities in London had, at the same time, discovered thousands of fake pills had breached security controls and made their way onto pharmacy shelves all over the United Kingdom. British law enforcement recently concluded their 4-year investigation, and they agreed to talk to us about how they broke the case, thanks in part to a piece of evidence seized from Kevin Hsu.
He had with him a laptop computer, and the significance of that laptop was huge in respect of our inquiry.
Mick Dietz is a former Scotland Yard detective who has been chasing down drug dealers and internet scammers for 30 years. Dietz is head of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or the MHRA. That's the United Kingdom's equivalent of this country's Food and Drug Administration, and is responsible for tracking down prescription drug counterfeiters in the UK. When Dietz and his investigators started looking at Hsu's computer, they quickly realized Hsu was watching them as well.
When we reconstructed his browser activity, we could see that he'd been visiting our web pages at the MHRA. He'd been downloading our recall notices so that he doesn't make any more batches of that medicine, which obviously he wouldn't be able to sell with that batch number on because nobody would touch it.
We spoke to Dietz in a storage room packed with seized counterfeit and illegal medicine, some of it confiscated from the case connected to Kevin Hsu. When American authorities shipped Hsu's laptop to England after his arrest, Dietz says they were able to connect the dots from Hsu to their case in the UK.
We found evidence on there linking Hsu to the European companies that have been involved in bringing these goods in. There were invoices on there relating to these goods. There were payments going out for our batches of medicine. So the laptop was gold dust.
Hsu's laptop was the key to understanding how tens of thousands of packages of fake medicine had found their way into the legitimate supply chain in the UK.
We were able to recover over 1.2 million doses immediately that hadn't yet reached pharmacies. But that still left 25,000 packs that had got out to patients and were never recovered.
Laboratory tests showed the recalled counterfeits had only 50 to 80% of the active ingredients. And although it is not believed that anyone was harmed by taking the fakes, Dietz says that patients were not getting the treatment they needed.
They contained lots of impurities. The coating was wrong. They didn't dissolve at the right rate in the body. They weren't effective.
But there was something more. Buried on Hsu's computer were documents from a drug import company. Investigators traced the company to a shady businessman who was already on the radar of Mick Dietz and British authorities. His name was Peter Gillespie. Gillespie was once a distributor of legitimate pharmaceuticals in the UK, but his license was revoked after landing in court for illegal business practices. And that, says Dietz, forced him into the black market.
So in effect, his business life had stopped. But of course, his appetite for risk increased, and to such an extent that he began to operate with counterfeit medicines.
Dietz says they discovered the counterfeit medicine was being shipped directly to Gillespie in Europe, in a way remarkably similar to what Hsu described to undercover agents in Houston just before his arrest.
These medicines came from China. They were shipped from Hong Kong, then on to Singapore, from Singapore by air freight into Belgium. And once they arrive in the European Union, they receive customs clearance for the whole of Europe in Belgium.
Once the fakes arrived in Belgium, they could be transported to any other country in the European Union. So Gillespie could easily truck them anywhere he chose. He took them to a warehouse in a residential area, now being used by another company with no connection to Gillespie, about an hour south of London.
This warehouse wouldn't appear on any paperwork anywhere on importation documents.
As these photos from the investigation show, high-tech computerized machinery at the warehouse relabeled and reboxed the fakes so they appeared to be real medicines. As investigators started closing in, Gillespie and his crew took off.
They cleared it out and they destroyed any evidence that was there. But on the underneath of the conveyor belts that were in that warehouse that were being used to apply the stickers, they'd left behind 3 of these stickers.
It was this tiny bit of evidence, combined with the invoices on Hsu's computer linking the 2 criminals, that helped convict Gillespie of conspiring to defraud pharmacists, selling drugs without authorization, and trademark violations. In April 2011, Gillespie was given 8 years in prison, a longer sentence than his likely supplier, Kevin Hsu.
And interesting to look at, Kevin Hsu got 6.5 years in the US. I think the difference there in sentences is because we could show that it had got to patients already here in the UK.
Dietz says he's satisfied with Gillespie's sentence, and he says he hates to imagine how many could have been harmed if Kevin Hsu hadn't been stopped in the United States.
I think Zhu had been running a successful business. He'd been confident that this was working well in Europe, and the temptation was there.
Dietz says they stopped Hsu in the UK, but Kevin Hsu told authorities he'd been in business in Europe for 6 years. No one knows the whereabouts of all those pills. When we come back, we take you to Africa, where a tidal wave of bad medicine is turning up in countries where rampant disease is being treated with fake pills. A special investigation from the back alleys of Nigeria. That's coming up next. And now to Africa. Malaria, cholera, and tuberculosis, all but forgotten elsewhere, still rage across the African continent. And as we found out, adding to the misery is this sad reality. Drugs that can treat those diseases are now frequently counterfeited. We went to Nigeria to see what their drug enforcement agency, called NAFDAC, is doing to try and reduce the unceasing tide of fake medicine coming into the country. And this is what the war on counterfeits looks like. Just days before we arrived, NAFDAC discovered a large shipment at the airport that was declared as clothing. Inspectors said the packaging was a dead giveaway. Counterfeiters often wrap their products in burlap and mailing tape like this. Inside were T-shirts wrapped around dozens of boxes of counterfeit antibiotics. Using a combination of new technology and old-fashioned word of mouth, Nigeria is battling callous and insidious counterfeiting operations. Big pill mills in China and elsewhere that are targeting the most vulnerable. Nigeria sits on the west coast of Africa and is the most populous country on the continent. Between the traffic and the crowds, Lagos, Nigeria's largest city, can be challenging to navigate. We were invited here by the head of the Nigerian version of the Food and Drug Administration. Dr. Paul Orhi is the Director General of the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, called for short NAFDAC.
Do you have the support from the very top?
Yes, we have the strong support of the top, the presidency.
Dr. Orhi, who is both a medical doctor and an attorney, left his family and a quiet life in Houston to return to the country of his birth. His days are quite different now. He is rushed through the traffic in a protected SUV with armed police.
We think that the law here is too weak and does not serve as a deterrent.
Cracking down on the crime syndicates that are flooding the country with fake drugs has made him a marked man.
Most Nigerians support us. Unfortunately, we operate under a very hostile environment too. My predecessor was shot at. Her headgear was removed by a bullet, narrowly escaped death. So it is not that always friendly, but the general public supports what we are doing.
So now they're going to cut into one of the containers.
Yes.
Despite his efforts, Dr. Orhi is outmatched. This is the port at Apapa, where 90% of all imports enter Nigeria. NAFDAC has just 19 inspectors to monitor all this cargo. On this day, Dr. Orhi and his team targeted 2 containers full of anti-malarial medicine that had just arrived from India. Anti-malarials are some of the most in-demand and highly counterfeited medicines in Africa. NAFDAC, the country's small inspection office, clearly has its hands full. As many as 4,000 containers are unloaded here every day.
It's got to be very difficult to keep up the shipment. I mean, I see ships, even while we've been here, arriving, offloading, you have containers everywhere. How can you keep up with the shipments?
It's a very difficult job, and we have to work round the clock to be able to just even keep up.
But in this drug war, the Nigerians bought the newest weapon on the market. Last February, NAFDAC got a high-tech machine that can almost instantly identify fake medicine. It is called the TruScan. And these handheld test machines don't come cheap. At $50,000 each, Orhi has had to scrape together funding and look for donors to help him buy the machines.
We'll start to look at quality issues as well in manufacturing.
Tom Woods spent years helping African countries get funding to fight diseases as a State Department official and at USAID. He now works in the private sector, putting African government agencies like Dr. Orhi's NAFDAC together with cutting-edge technology makers and the organizations that can help pay for that technology. Woods convinced the Massachusetts makers of the TruScan to donate 2 of the devices to Nigeria, and he's also working with the World Bank to raise money for more of the machines.
So go ahead and test it.
Okay, your tablet is there, snap it.
Using this portable device, it takes under a minute to complete a preliminary field test, the first step to verifying that the medicine is or is not authentic. Spot checks of a random sample of the drugs using the TruScan showed this container was in the clear. Like something in a science fiction movie, the TruScan, also called a Raman spectrometer, beams a tiny laser at the medicine. It records how the laser light passes through the pill and checks the information against its database.
But with this, we can on the spot decide whether it is a good product or not. And if we decide that it's a good product, we release it and decongest the pots.
A 2003 survey found that up to 80% of the medicine distributed to major pharmacies in Lagos was fake. But Orhi says the TruScan has helped change that.
It used to be, by 2005, it was reduced to 16.7%. Now, our survey has shown that we have reduced it to less than 10%, just about 5%. We hope that that is the actual picture.
That 5% may be more of a goal than a reality. And the TruScan is not a cure-all. The Nigerians are using the machine as a first line of defense and still send all the drugs tested in the field with the TruScan to a lab for more complete testing.
Why is it necessary to follow up with a lab analysis?
Well, first and foremost, the TruScan is a new equipment, and so we have to validate it each time, the results of TruScan, until we become sure that the results that we get from TruScan are consistent with lab analysis. And apart from that, also for evidence in court, we have to validate our results with the lab analysis.
In recent years, we've seen technology developed that we think is very viable for this purpose.
Woods is now a private consultant for the makers of the TruScan. But during his time on the Africa desk in the State Department, he saw firsthand the growing problem of counterfeit drugs.
It's clear that Africa seems to be a dumping ground for these types of fake medicines, and it's killing a lot of people. And I think it's been a bit of a blind spot for the international community, for donor programs that focus on health development, for regulatory agencies. So I'm not surprised, really, when you see this in a place like Nigeria, despite the fact that we have a very strong regulatory body. The drugs are flowing, and it's an increasing threat.
When a shipment is seized, NAFDAC tags it as evidence and takes it to a secret warehouse. At the warehouse, confiscated illicit material is stacked to the ceiling. There are not only drugs, but counterfeit wine, diapers, chemicals, and cosmetics. But much of it is fake medicine with a street value in the millions. And it's all just the latest haul.
All what you see here is just a fraction of what we have actually intercepted, because we routinely destroy every other month. We do destruction exercise. And so what you see here is just a fraction of what we have.
NAFDAC seizes so many counterfeit goods, they have to destroy what they have every few months just to make room for the next wave of seized fakes. But this is one container NAFDAC and Orhi are holding on to for evidence. They received a tip that it was not boxes of packing tape as listed on the manifest. It actually contained boxes of fake anti-malarial drugs. The United Nations estimates that 45 million doses of fake anti-malarial drugs have been sold in West Africa with a value of $438 million. Fakes like these have particularly dangerous consequences. If the medicine has even a low dosage, the malaria parasite can build up a resistance, making the real drugs ineffective.
We are at threat of losing our frontline first-course drugs for a disease that kills over 1 million people a year. And so that's very dangerous. It's global. It impacts all of us. We've had malaria in the United States up until, well, just probably, 60 years ago. There's no reason it couldn't come back.
If the drug's effectiveness keeps being cut by diluted or fake drugs, completely fake drugs, then we lose our first line of defenses.
That's right. That's right. So one person's fake drug becomes somebody else's drug-resistant disease. And we see that on the rise, and it's very frightening.
The fakes were labeled as having been made in India, but NAFDAC traced the shipment to China.
West Bombay.
The Chinese government has promised to deal with the people involved in the shipment in their own special way.
So we took up the matter with both the Chinese and the Indian authorities. As a result, the Chinese have they informed us that they have arrested 6 of the persons who were connected with the manufacture and shipment of this container, and the 6 have been sentenced to death.
Are there or are there not organized Chinese gangs?
Well, it seems that there are organized criminal networks behind this. The more you scratch, the more you realize this problem is not rogue individuals or guys in back street alleys anymore. This is big business, lots of money behind it, and it's global, transnational crime syndicates.
With such an organized effort to get these drugs into the country, fake medicine is bound to hit the streets. Bustling, crowded markets like these are found all across Africa. This is where most Nigerians go to buy everything they need, including their medicine. Stalls sell everything from cough syrup to life-saving medicine, and they are not well regulated. Thousands of tiny, crowded shops like these can be found in markets across the country. Orhi wanted to show us a spot inspection of the pharmacies in Idamoto Market.
Well, it's Saturday and the market's very busy today.
Yes, it's always like this.
It's always like this.
Saturday, Sunday, it doesn't matter to them.
We quickly learned that inspection requires aggressive, quick action. And not everyone was happy to see the inspectors or our cameras. 6 different teams spread out across the markets this day to test a list of drugs most often counterfeited. Inspectors go after the most common fakes, drugs that are supposed to save lives but are instead threatening public health.
Doctor, how often does your organization and your employees do this kind of testing?
We do them randomly. We do them just randomly. Unfortunately, we do not have enough of this equipment yet, and you can see the need at the ports itself is very high. And so we're not able yet to do them as often as we want, but we just, once in a while, we do them randomly to keep these people on their toes, that they need to make sure they know the stock where their medicines are coming from.
At our first stop, all 3 samples passed.
With this equipment, we can, within an hour, test almost all the medicines here.
Right. Faster testing also means more testing. Orhi and his inspectors can move through the crowded maze of shops before sellers are tipped off that they are there. And it wasn't long before they found a suspect medicine. A box of pills with a familiar name and manufacturer. These boxes supposedly come from the American pharmaceutical giant Pfizer.
This is an antihypertensive drug for treatment of hypertension, made by Pfizer.
Well, the packaging looks good.
And people counterfeit all sorts of medicines.
Well, let's see if this passes. Oh, failed. Well, now, where did he get this medicine?
From which company? From the Pfizer distributor. You have the receipts? Okay, let's see the receipts that you got it from.
Norvasc is the most prescribed brand name high blood pressure medicine in the world. And even though the box says Pfizer, these tablets could prove deadly because they don't contain enough of the active ingredient. It will take more tests in a laboratory to confirm the TrueScan result.
We'll take it to the laboratory and double check too.
Right.
But in meanwhile, we're going to place it on hold. All this one, we're going to place it on hold. You cannot sell this one until we come and tell you that it is okay to sell it.
And in the third shop, the same drug, Norvasc, failed the TrueScan test again.
Oh, it failed.
It failed. And you can see the problem is the same. In the other shop, it failed. In this shop, it has failed.
Right.
So it means that maybe the same supplier, a bigger supplier, is distributing them. It might be all over the country somewhere. So we have to check it and maybe recall it all over the country. Who supplies this medicine to you? Okay, you have it. So we have got The information about the company that supplies this medicine.
Yeah, that's his invoice, right?
The invoice.
Yep.
If it doesn't pass, we can follow up and go to that store.
Yeah.
It might be a bigger problem. It might be a wholesaler just distributing it to other people too. So we will have to investigate and go all the way back to the source.
This pharmacist agreed to take us to the wholesaler who sold him the suspect Norvasc.
So we're leaving now the Yuba pharmacy, and the pharmacist is going to take us to the person who supplied him. Henry, we're going this way.
As we perspired and stumbled our way through a maze of back alleys, Orhi explained that the drug supply chain in Nigeria is as tangled and confusing as the streets in the market. Oftentimes, the small pharmacists are unknowingly pushing fake medicine.
Sometimes they buy from genuine distributors who represent this company like Pfizer. But you know that there are some criminal elements sometimes among the genuine distributors. Sometimes they will mix the bad medicine with the good one and sell it to the unsuspecting people who think that they're buying medicine directly from the company.
Dr. Orhi says the reason why he agreed to take on the challenges and dangers of the job is because in a place where disease is so rampant, fake drugs are making the fight even harder.
Well, this is a real back alley here.
Yes. But still we have a lot of medicine stores.
Yeah, this is even deeper into the back alley.
We came here because we saw that one of your medicine is not exactly right.
Okay.
The pills on the shelf at the wholesaler, AA Pharmaceuticals, had the same batch numbers as the medicine that failed at the shops.
Give him this one. This is the one here. It is
What
here.
happened here, we came to the shop of the middleman. Started with the pharmacy, where this Pfizer product failed. Now they're taking from the middleman's main supply, and they're going to test one of his pills that he's dispensing from here, in effect the on-scene warehouse.
Look for Augmentin.
Get Augmentin. I'll spare it again.
And now from the warehouse supply, it's failed.
What percent? 64%.
Well, it had some of the ingredient, but not.
It has some of the ingredient, but not
what it's supposed
not
to
what it's
have.
supposed to be.
The field test shows the pills contain only about 2/3 of the amount on the box. Orhi said busts like today are small successes in combating an overwhelming problem.
Well, doctor, I'd ask you, what do you say to that person living saying, listen, I'm sorry this is happening in Nigeria, I'm sorry it's happening in Africa, but we here in the States, we've got more than we can handle. We just can't worry about these problems.
Unfortunately, it might be happening right there in the United States too. It's not just the developing country. The only problem is that in developing country, the problem is more pronounced because most people think that we do not have or realize the fact that most countries in Africa do not yet have a good regulatory authority or the ability to detect these products, and so they are bringing it here as a dumping ground. But definitely they will sooner or later target the bigger markets, like the United States of America and other advanced countries.
The scary thing was that this was just an average day in Lagos, in an average market, and you can walk into one of these stalls and find fake drugs on the shelves. And that's life and death. And it's not just Nigeria's problem, but it's really becoming the world's problem, because these drugs are not manufactured in large measure right here in Nigeria. But as you follow it up the food chain, you realize that we're all becoming more vulnerable.
Tomorrow, these shops in the market will continue to sell medications. And back at the port, more containers full of drugs will arrive from India and China. Some will be real and some fake. Meanwhile, at Dr. Orhi's lab, technicians will be racing to identify one from the other. Counterfeits of medicine designed to save lives have now become the latest threat to life for millions across Africa. And that's our program for tonight. We'll be back next week with more updates from our previous investigations. For HDNet, from New York, Dan Rather reporting. Good night. If you would like to add your name to an email list for information on upcoming programs, or if you would just like to send a question or comment, please email us at viewer@hd.net.